I'll give you an example.
Yes.
One of my favorite ad campaigns of all time is Donna Karan's collection. She had a whole ad campaign with this model, Rosemary McGortha, in which it was about a first female president. And in it, she even have an image of Rosemary raising her hand up in Women
Creation.
We Trust.
Oh, yeah.
That was so monumental to me, and it looked so elegant.
What's amazing is ad campaigns used to basically be editorial.
Hello, this is Dina, and this is my podcast, First. In this episode, we're discussing evolution. I have here my 24-year-old daughter, Maya, as my first guest. I would like to discuss the evolution of culture and fashion from the heyday of my time, which was the 80s and 90s, all the way to your generation up until today. Hi, Maya. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I am too. So let's start by discussing certain personalities that I think appeal fashion-wise to me as well as you, although we're completely different generations. We've got Carolyn Bessette Kennedy. And of course, she was very influential to my generation because she was one of the few examples of American woman that is absolutely chic. And that's rare, weirdly, because it's just a different sensibility than it would be in the rest of the world. She looked so effortless, yet at the same time, extremely polished and glamorous. And I think she really captured the essence of that decade. And that's how I view her. And what is the appeal to you?
Well, I've always said this. Not only is she super stylish and chic, like you said.
Was.
Rest in peace, was. A big part of her appeal to me as well is the mystery that kind of surrounds her, especially dying quite early. But also during her time when she was still alive, you didn't know much about her. And all the photographs are from paparazzi. It's very private. And you only know about her through stories from friends and acquaintances and coworkers from her time at Calvin Klein, which also says a lot about her style. The fact, I read this online apparently, she used to work at the retail store in Boston while she was in college, and she was scouted from working there to work at their PR offices in Manhattan, which just proves to you that even when she was a younger person, she still had that. It wasn't
definitely. I think she was born with it.
She was born with it. It wasn't her marriage. It wasn't any of that.
Not at all.
It was so innate. And yeah, that's a major part of the appeal. And then on the more obvious side, she just dressed so well.
Yes, very true. You know, she wore Yuji Yamamoto at a time when that was considered out of the box and more directional, more avant-garde. And she made it accessible. She made it look very easy. And I think that was the power she had within fashion. But even in wearing a Versace, she once wore a Versace dress to an event in LA, and she managed to make it look very streamlined and very minimalist, which is not
the word you would
antithesis
associate
of
with
what
Versace.
was. So no, I agree with you. You know, the other person that I truly feel was a big inspiration for me to this day is Sade. And the reason that is because when I first saw her in a video, I was 10 years old and it was Smooth Operator, and I had never seen anybody look like that at the time. She was so ahead of the curve, wearing a very simple backless leather white dress with that braid and the hoops and the red lips. It was so elegant. And it even resonates today.
And also that video came out in the 80s.
Yes,
which is
it did.
Surprising
came out
for how minimalist she looked.
Absolutely, because everybody else was extremely frilly. You know, the 80s was not exactly, a lot of people tend to romanticize it, but I was there, and believe me, some of it was really bad.
But there are some good references. Like when I think of the 80s and I think of what I appreciate, I think of like the Brat Pack movies and the way that Molly Ringwald dressed. Like that's my idea of the 80s, which again is coming from how old I am.
Of course.
I wasn't there for it.
Another person that really, really, I think also has both worlds is Chloe Sevigny.
I adore her. You know this.
Oh, me too. I think she always thought of her as the coolest girl.
She is the original it girl. Like her and Parker Posey give the same energy to me, but Chloe is definitely on the more stylish front.
Absolutely. You know, I even watched her recently at Poker Face. She was a guest star.
Yes.
And she's
Obviously
and I
friends
love
with
that it's her
Natasha
second
Lyonne.
time with Natasha after Russian Doll.
Yes.
But yeah, she exudes a particular coolness. I even remember an article. There was an interview with her in the early 2000s in which she'd said that she was heavily inspired by hijabi girls in New Jersey.
Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Isn't that? I mean, it's incredible. She's ahead of her time there too.
Definitely.
And
I
she just
also
thought,
remember reading an article, I forget if it was in the 90s or 2000s, but it was like around the new millennium, an interview where she was talking about her being obsessed with I don't know what they're called, but the sandals you can buy at Chinatown.
oh yeah, I know exactly what they're talking. We used to all wear them.
Yes, but she kind of like made that
them
a
back.
thing.
Yes. Those were our Crocs, by the way.
Exactly. And I have a pair. I literally have a pair.
I can't believe it. Yeah, that's very funny that you should say that. You know, what is it about the 90s to you that is appealing? Why do you think there is a resurgence of kids your age wanting to dress like that?
One thing I feel like a lot of people my age tend to forget when they talk about decades is in their mind, like the 80s is Full House or something. Like they have a very specific image in mind. They think mullets, they think crazy colors, like hair rock, that kind of thing. And the 90s, for some reason, is always thought of as Nirvana and Friends. Like there's like a very specific
you
view
should say that.
people,
Nirvana is grunge.
Yes, and that was
Friends
early 90s. That's what my point is. I feel like each decade you could separate almost into three parts. Like when I think of the 90s, Beverly Hills 90210 came out.
Absolutely. Melrose
Twin
Place.
Peaks. Exactly. All of that is a very different 90s than 93, 94, Nirvana,
Yes.
grunge, Seattle, that vibe. And then when you go towards the new millennium, you get movies like Clueless.
Well, Clueless happened in 95.
Barring the Clueless fumble, my point being, like, even if you look at a show like Friends, which has a special place in my heart because
Of course.
my dad loves that show, but nonetheless, even just watching that show and seeing how the style changes from season to season, the closer you get to the new millennium, it becomes more streamlined. I feel like early 90s, there was a very interesting fascination with the 1930s and 40s.
Absolutely.
That's
it showed up
the
again.
thin eyebrows. Like that's where
Yes.
I credit that.
That was,
and
so
Chicana,
I'm going to give you a
culture.
year. I'm actually going to give you a specific year.
Is it the Dolce & Gabbana?
It was.
Yeah, I
So
knew it.
that was 1993. And it was the entire collections of designers at that time were all revisiting the 70s
Through the
by
30s.
way, because the 70s were a reflection of the 30s, 40s.
Yes.
So think Yves Saint Laurent doing the very controversial
Photo shoot.
the very controversial collection with the big fur coats.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which people were very upset with at the time because for them it kind of brought them back to the end of World War II.
Which
and
was
it brought
sensitive
back-
at that point.
Exactly, but also brought back ladies of the night that dressed like that.
Yes.
And so people were like, no self-respecting woman is going to wear that. And it was the stack heel,
Yes.
which was a redo of the 40s. And then fast forward to 1993 with the 70s as a reference, because
Yes.
in the 1970s, that's what people went back to. A lot of people may not know this.
Like looking at even that photo shoot of the Dolce & Gabbana is very much Marlene Dietrich.
Absolutely.
Like that's the same.
That was shot by Stephen Meisel.
Yes.
And it had Nadia Orman, and it had Kate Moss, and it had Megan Douglas. And it was all the thin eyebrows and the straight hair. Again, hippie almost,
Yes.
but people that don't know.
Also, there was a weird fascination with medieval style. Also,
Absolutely.
like the velvet and 10 Things I Hate About You. There's a specific
There is.
character who dresses very medieval by way of 90s, strangely.
Yes.
And that's coming back now, actually.
I know, which is weird.
can discuss
it just keeps recycling. And it's very funny. Your grandmother, every time I'd show my mother something and I would be excited about it back in the
Yes.
90s, she would just look at me and say, oh, they brought that back.
You say the same thing to me now.
I get it.
Yeah.
I think
Fashion
after a
is
certain
cyclical,
time,
obviously.
I think after a while,
Yes.
I think you start to know more and see more and understand that styles are not really, you're not
Nothing
really
is- nothing is
reinventing the
original.
wheel.
Nothing is
Exactly.
original.
And then that just keeps repeating itself. So I think, yes, I catch myself saying the same thing my mother said to me. But there's another example of that fascination or that 70s vibe
By way of
the 1930s and 40s. Madonna's Deeper and Deeper.
yes,
video.
especially her whole Bedtime stories.
Bedtime
correct? Like
stories.
that era.
Definitely. The thin eyebrows,
Yes.
bleached.
And it's back now as well.
There we go. And that was actually the album where she introduced New Jack Swing into her repertoire,
Yes.
which at that point in time was very big in music.
Yes.
So yeah, there we go. So you see her kind of looking like a 1930s, 1940s siren.
Literally Marlena Dietrich.
Yes,
That photo right there.
which by the way was always a big inspiration
Well,
for her
definitely.
anyway.
Yeah.
But the Marlena Dietrich effect was more in erotica
Yes.
than it is in this era of Madonna.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of Madonna, this is very important to your generation, whoever's listening to this podcast in your age group. It is a true shame that people of your age only kind of associate Madonna as being a caricature of herself. Little do they know that this woman reigned supreme
She was
for
revolutionary.
20 years.
Yes.
I remember falling in love with her, of course, with Lucky Star and Holiday and all the way till now. And she was such a renegade. And here's the beauty and the genius of Madonna. She really surrounded herself with the best of the best.
The best team.
Whether it was the best music producers, from Nile Rodgers all the way to Merwais, whether it was the best hair and makeup, whether it was the best photographers. You know, Stephen Meisel did the cover of Like a Virgin's album in 1984. People didn't know who Stephen Meisel was.
Yes.
And even when they did, they mocked him. Everybody, people were upset. Bert Stern called him that copier. And he may have been a copier, but he was such an amazing copier that he made it even look better than the original.
Yes.
And so it's just really interesting that, I really sincerely hope that people would be willing to revisit her.
Discography.
There we go.
It's a tough one.
It's one of those words I read and never pronounce.
Yeah.
Now, there used to be a time when fashion was absolutely directed by the powers that be, whether it was magazines, editors, and art directors. That
I have
worked on ad
actually a
campaigns.
perfect example about this. I
Tell
was
me.
watching, I forget what it was. It could have been a video on YouTube or it could have been a documentary, but it was showing a clip of a fashion show during the 90s. Classic runway. And everyone is getting into their seats. And you can see every single person who's sitting in the front row or whatever row they may be had notebooks. They were there to
absolutely.
work.
They were there to work.
Exactly. They're writing an article. They're working. And it's not the same as today because now it's more a networking event, basically, and a reason to be photographed. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just so different.
No, absolutely. And I can elaborate on that a little more, but I just want to continue this point about saying that there used to be a time when these elite league of extraordinary men and women were really leading the way on what we should wear, how we should wear it, and they were dictating it to us. And I used to study magazines from cover to cover, and hence why I wanted to save up and buy my first trench coat or my first Chanel bag, because I felt like you'd arrived if you start collecting
Status symbols.
timeless pieces that you feel are going to work for you forever. Now, the difference is now magazines, and I mean, you can tell me if this is true or not, people are not really buying magazines to have these magazines tell them how they should dress.
You'd be surprised. I don't think anyone buys magazines anymore. My friend and I sometimes enjoy going and shopping for magazines, but I've noticed
But would
that
they be like what I call books, like really beautifully polished?
the last magazine I bought was a copy of Interview. So like actually a complete opposite.
Okay, so not a Cabana magazine, not, Gentlewoman, not something big and chunky and...
They're basically filled with ads, and ads are not as interesting as they used to be. So
Oh, goodness. Can I just tell you, when I was looking at these magazines, not only was I tearing up pages from the actual editorials, I was also tearing
ads.
pages
I
from
remember
the ads. The
your
ads were
closet.
insanely good.
like when you look at like the old, like
I'll give you an example.
Yes.
One of my favorite ad campaigns of all time is Donna Karen's collection. She had a whole ad campaign with this model, Rosemary McGortha, in which it was about a first female president. And in it, you even have an image of Rosemary raising her hand up in Women
Inauguration.
We Trust.
oh yeah, that's
That was so monumental to me, and it looked so
what's
elegant.
amazing is ad campaigns used to basically be editorials.
Absolutely. You know why? Because the art directors and stylists that were doing them were of that level.
And they knew what they were doing, and it was
No, and they were big budgets.
And they were big budget. That's a whole other realm. Yeah.
So why do you think that this generation is more, why are they influenced by TikTokers, Instagrammers, YouTubers? What do you think is going on there?
I mean, I can only speak for myself and the people I surround myself with because everyone is different, to be fair.
Yes, of course.
But definitely one thing that is very important to mention is my generation has the attention span of a goldfish at this point.
Yes, but you would have thought that so I have a question for you. When I was your age, I didn't have the internet. I actually had to not only study these magazines and buy some books that I can afford, I had to go to the library.
No, I know.
And
it was a different time.
And why is it that was more effort, but I actually started to know more, whereas you have access in a click of a button to find out and Google an image and find out who did it? Why is it that
I think if you ask people from your generation, they probably didn't look into it as much as you did. Like, it's personal desire. You had an interest in knowing, and again, every human being is different.
Okay.
And yeah, going back to what I was talking about, I think the reason
attention span.
Why TikTok and Instagram, like through the fashion lens.
Yes.
Obviously, music is a whole other thing as well.
Of course.
But people are just so easily influenced, and TikTok is so short. The video itself, the video format.
Yes, that's the format.
Exactly. In the same way as Instagram, where you're just swiping.
Wasn't Vine like that?
Kind of, but Vine was just generally more comedic. Another thing that I want to mention social media-wise is both Tumblr and Pinterest.
Oh, I love Pinterest. I
feel like that's an extension of what I don't look at magazines, but if I have a very particular niche interest in like someone from a certain decade and I want to find photos of, like, let's take Chloe 70, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Those are perfect places for archival photos that you won't find on Google the same way.
That's very true. And it's the same with Tumblr.
Exactly.
Tumblr is the closest thing to looking at magazines for me.
I agree.
Maybe because the format was so big. You know what I mean? Like the imagery that pops up is big. And actually, weirdly, when I got on Instagram, the reason it became my favorite is because I used Instagram almost like my mood board.
Yeah.
I mean, I know
you still kind of do.
You guys don't do that. You guys cater your Instagram accounts. You start deleting and putting and
that's also,
editing.
Again, a very personal thing. Some people don't care.
No, it's something I've noticed in your age group.
I think we like a curation. I prefer things to be cohesive. I don't
think
there's anything wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong at all.
But wait, I have another thing to add. We were also just talking about this last night, where we were sending each other accounts, like some accounts I love on Instagram, like at Lost J Crew or at Gap Playlist.
Yes.
I also follow another account called Scan Fashion Editorials or something.
Oh, yes.
So basically they just scan old images from catalogs and magazines.
The Fashion Spot does that.
Some of my favorite things to look at.
Of course.
But I'm a very nostalgic person. I tend to look for inspiration in the past.
Yes.
Or in surprising ways, more so, like looking at costume design in movies. Absolutely. I get a lot of styling inspiration from that.
Absolutely.
So it's not always just...
No. And I completely agree with you. And I think, it's funny with the Gap, I lived it and I remember those CDs. Actually, it wasn't just the Gap. It was
like Starbucks. Yeah.
Starbucks and
the
Banana
compilation.
Republic. They all had these amazing compilations.
Also, we love Hotel Costs compilations.
Of course. That was such a big thing. It was two things, actually. It was Cost and it was Claude Chal, because Claude used to do the compilations for them. And then he had his own thing going. And it was kind of amazing. This is pre-streaming. There was no such thing.
And speaking of nostalgic, I basically only listen to music that has not come out in the past 20 years.
Well, honey, you know what? I hate to break it to you, but the best music has already been made.
I sometimes love to hear something completely synthetic. It depends, but I just tend to prefer actual instrumentation.
Well, I'd like to think we have some influence on you.
Definitely. Speaking of, I was just listening to Duran Duran as I was walking this morning. I've been really into the song Love Voodoo.
Yes.
And their cover of Femme Fatale. Like that album.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
So let's discuss this for a minute. I was talking about how, I wanted to save up and buy luxury things that I couldn't afford when I was your age. And I would look at magazines and I would see, and obviously there was no The Real, and there was some consignment shops, but there weren't many venues in which a person can find something authentic and vintage. Why is it that you do not covet those things, although they might be available to you?
I think that weirdly enough, things are too accessible now. Like, no, like barring price, let's just speak about
Yes.
accessibility.
You mean supply?
Supply and demand. My interest in vintage clothing is because it is inaccessible in a certain way while being very accessible in another.
Yes.
What I mean by that is it tends to be marked down price-wise because it has been used or whatever it may be. But what I enjoy about it is it's inaccessible in the way that nobody else really has that same piece.
So do you think that the turnoff would be that you feel that it is available, accessible, as you said, everywhere? Because I will tell you the reason that happened. There used to be a time when you would go to a particular city in the world.
Like a Chanel, you would
like
go to
a
boutique,
Chanel,
yes.
let's say in Paris, or not even, or it could be in Rome. And you would find a piece and you would be so excited because after you purchased it, you feel like you're maybe one of the very few people that have that particular
Yes,
piece.
depending on location.
And you could really enjoy it for a long
Yes.
time. Whereas it's the same with Prada, by the way. I used to buy these amazing Prada things from very remote places that you would never find in the main cities. I think that with conglomerates now really owning, I want to say 80% of what the luxury market has to offer, what they've done is they have made it so streamlined that you would find the same, let's say, Chanel bag
And
or
also
Dior
shopping
bag.
online has made it
Yes,
a very
absolutely.
different
But some of these brands are
landscape.
not sold online. So
Very
this is
true.
why I'm going to give you that example. You are, let's say you're interested in a Dior bag. Let's say a Dior saddle bag, which came out in the 90s, which
Yeah,
came out
exactly.
in the very late 90s. And the thing is, you would not only find it at every Dior boutique in the world, worldwide, you would also find it in airports.
Yes.
So do you feel that that's the reason?
I think a part of it, yes. And also because of the way the trend cycle works, and I'm speaking more specifically about things like purses, shoes, accessories,
Yes.
sunglasses, whatever it may be. I can think of so many specific items that go viral or get really popular for a short amount of time. Like the last one I can think of is that Miu Miu mini skirt
Yes.
that
Oh my
everybody
goodness,
and their
that was
mother wore.
everywhere.
And now you don't see it. And I'm like, what was the point of that?
I don't know. And the thing is, by the time it's released, by the time you
Exactly.
can buy it, you already lost interest in it.
Versus when you think of something like one of my favorite things ever is when Prada used to do the nylon bags, like the backpacks and
That was a
messenger
staple.
bags. It's incredible and also affordable, I guess, because of the material. And it was such a big thing. And it never really went out of style. Even today, when you see someone wearing it, you're not thinking of it in the same way as you think of the Dior saddlebag.
No, of course
They
not.
have
Of
a different
course not.
flavor.
But also it used to be a uniform. So that's the other thing that's different between our era and yours. There used to be a time, whether in the late 80s or 90s, where you can immediately tell if somebody's a fashion editor because there was almost a uniform.
Yes.
They were all in black and there was a lot of Prada involved, a lot of Prada nylon involved.
Calvin Klein. I think of
lot.
certain brands in my mind.
Absolutely. Whereas now it was very interesting. You and I were walking down the street and there were 3 or 4 people walking and you immediately identified
Yes.
those 3 and 4 people from specific, you were like, this is this and this is that. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're
Everything,
referencing.
especially with the way the internet works, and I'm a victim of this. Everyone is. You can tell what influences people, more so when it's something that is trendy, I guess.
Yes.
And because there's so many niche subgroups on the internet, you can really tell. I don't know if that's just me. I don't know.
No,
if
it's
that's
almost
a
like
generational thing.
that guide thing, that on Instagram, I don't know what you call it.
Oh, the starter packs.
starter
of, yeah.
Yeah, like you identified it. Whereas
Actually, that is a perfect example. There's an account on Instagram called Starter Packs of NYC or New York City, whatever it may be. And it's very particular to New York, to be fair. But it's just, they'll show you a white tank top. And the way that the other images correlate to that white tank top, you know a person who dresses like that. You know a
Wow.
person. It's very interesting.
it is
Because
interesting.
now people really take pride in objects to define themselves.
Yes.
It could be anything from sunglasses to a book, even.
Yes, but you know what?
Books
I think
become trendy as well. It's
they
fascinating.
have.
They're
They have. I'll
accessories
never
now.
forget. I'll never forget White Lotus and when you talked about those
Oh,
girls.
goodness.
Yes. No, but the reason I say this is because I think that's as
No,
old
but
as
especially
time.
because I was right. They were influenced by specific people, by the books they were reading.
Yes, but I think this is as old as time. I
very
think
true.
buying objects to signify your station in life is something that
Or the subgroup that you belong to. Even another point of conversation that's so interesting to me is how headphones, like the type of headphones or AirPods or whatever they may be, you use can be a style influence. Vogue came out with an article about wired headphones. Like even just something as simple as the Apple wired headphones are a statement.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
They signify to the world
That you don't care enough.
who you are. But you know what? It's funny that you say that because there's one last point I'm going to bring up on an example of something that endured from the time it was created to today. And although it's, available, the supply is massive, it has not lost its luster. The Air Jordans.
Okay, I disagree just because I'm not a sneaker person. I've never cared for sneakers.
It's not that I'm a sneaker person.
Actually, I would weirdly say that, well, to be fair, it is a classic in the same way that a Chuck Taylor shoe is a classic.
That's kind of incredible.
Yeah.
How did it become as significant today as it was the day it came out?
Slightly nostalgia, I would have to say. And it's a classic. We can't knock the power of a classic.
No, we can't. Yes, you're absolutely right. So, Maya, thank you so much for spending this time with me and helping
Anything
me.
for you.
Oh, thank you. But I have one last question, one last subject I'd like to
shoot.
discuss with you. How does it feel to be raised by a mom who lived the 90s? What was my influence on you as a mother? Because I think that most mothers and most daughters have some kind of
Well, I think, sorry to cut you off.
No,
but I already have
tell
an
me.
answer for this. I definitely feel influenced by not only you, but also my dad,
Of course.
because not only through music and through film, but also through clothing. I feel like both of you have such distinct opinion and perspective on all of these things that definitely translated to me and my siblings. Well, one thing that I used to do a lot is I would go and take your magazines.
Yes.
100%.
That makes me
I
so
would
happy.
sit around in your dressing room while you happen to be getting ready. And I remember you kind of giving me my first lip gloss or giving me those small things of me just sitting there observing you and admiring you, which I think is human.
I think
Most
every
people-
every girl does that with her mom.
Yeah.
Clothes wise, did you ever see something even as a child and you were like, oh my goodness, I want to have that?
Definitely one thing it just popped into my mind. I used to love how you would style scarves.
Really?
You know those oversized Hermes scarves?
Yes.
You would wear them as a dress. You'd wear them as tops.
Yes.
You'd, put them in your hair.
Like a halter top.
It's very Babe Paley, just repurposing certain things.
Yes.
So that's one thing I remember vividly admiring. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Again, the scarf does not have to be Hermes, but it could be
It could be
any
any scarf.
silk scarf. It doesn't have to always be worn in a specific way. It could fully be worn as a top.
Agreed. But was there no piece you coveted?
Oh, so many. Literally, I can't even begin to list them.
Just mention one and that'll be the end of the episode.
A clothing piece or any piece?
Any piece.
Well, you know this. I'm obsessed with all your Elsa Peretti jewelry. And I literally just borrowed one today.
Well, that's a very good example. Thank you, Maya.
Of course, thank you.
This has been First by Dina. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you join me in the next episode. Goodbye.